Hi everyone, this is about Lab 5. Lab 5 can be a little difficult because we're starting to use some graphical user interfaces, and in the beginning it just might be a little confusing on how to create information in one panel or in one class and then passing that to another class. So I just wanted to hopefully help everybody get started. So for this one, what I did was I downloaded the sample project that's available on the assignment called Lab5 Startup. And when I did that, it comes with these 5 files. We have app.java, and app.java is simply creating a new mainframe object called MJF. So let's take a look. So that means that when the program starts, it's going to go to the main and it's going to go ahead and create a new mainframe object. So that will be the next thing that gets executed. So if we go to mainframe.java and we start at the top, so mainframe.java extends JFrame. So this is going to be the window, okay? So we have to have a frame so that we can put panels on top of that frame. On line 8, we're creating a control panel called MJP, MyJPanel. And we have actually a control panel.java also that we'll take a look at. But before I do that, let's take a look at the constructor for this class. So on line 10 is the start of the constructor. The first thing that it does is it calls super to give a title to your frame. So this will show up on the top portion of the window. Please include the Mac layout setup as part of your program, even if you're using a PC, because then whoever launches your program, if they're running a Mac, it'll work fine. If you don't include that, then it might show up as a blank screen on a Mac. And a lot of times I use my Mac to do the grading. So please include the Mac layout setup, both the call and the method that is defined on lines 21 through 31. Then it says, okay, on line 15 says get the content pane for this frame and add the panel called MJP and put it in the middle, in the center. Then we have set default close so that when you click on the X, it will close everything. We have the size set as 800 by 480. And finally, the set visible. You have to make your frame visible, so you want to set it to true. One thing to note is that the set visible must be the last thing you do. Otherwise, it'll set it visible before it actually adds the content pane and you won't see it. All right, so let's go ahead and go to control panel next. I'm trying to follow the logic that the program will actually follow. So in line 5, we have control panel extends JPanel, and we're creating 2 new panels. We have a center panel and a top panel. The center panel is called CP, the top panel is called TP. Then we have on line 13 a call to super. Line 14, we're creating a border layout for the control panel. Now, the control panel is going to have 2 more panels on top of it, okay? But it's going to have a layout of a border layout. And then we set the background, we set the layout to the border layout, we set the background to gray, and then we create the 2 new panels. And then we add those panels. We add the top panel to the north part of your border layout. So that'll be at the very top. And then we add the center panel to the center of the screen. All right, so let's go there next. Let's take a look at the top panel. So the top panel creates 3 buttons right now. And it sets the background color of the panel itself to yellow, and then it adds some text to the first 2 buttons, and then it puts an image on the 3rd button. Then it adds the 3 buttons to the panel. Okay, let's go to the center panel next. The center panel is going to use a grid layout, and it has 3 rows and 1 column. Then you set the layout to be the grid, and the grid is going to have 3 buttons. So what it'll do is it'll automatically adjust the size so that each button is equally sized on your center panel. And each button's going to have text on it. So if I run this without making any changes, this is going to give you a good start to what the final project should look like. All right, so here we have The top panel, as you can see, is the one that was labeled TP, has the background of yellow, and it had 3 buttons. One button had text I belong to top panel, the next button had we are, and the third button had an image. Down below is the center panel, which had 3 buttons, and as you can see, it automatically spaces them so they each have the same amount of space. So this is going to look a lot like where we need to go with our assignment for this lab. So let me close this. Now, in the mainframe, let's start with app.java, then we go to mainframe.java. What I suggest is that you go to the control panel, and here is where we can create our group object. So let me go ahead and show you how you're going to do this. So you can import your group, but I'm just going to go ahead and create a new class, and I'm going to call it group. And I'm going to click Finish. All right, so for my group, I'm going to keep it simple, and I'm going to say public string, and I'm going to create group name, because we know that we want to print the group name. So now I'm going to create a constructor, public group, that takes in a string, that takes in a string, and it is called group. I'll just call it group, and then I'm going to assign group name to group. And I'm going to add a new method that says public string get group name. Okay, so that I can use this method and it will just return whatever the group name is. Now your group will have the 4 student objects as well. It's going to use a lot of what you did for Lab 4. But for now, I just wanted to create one group class that I can use just to show you how to pass it to each of the different panels. All right, so I'm going back over to Control Panel next. And in the Control Panel, I'm going to create a new group object. So I'll do group G1 equals new group, and I'll give it a name. Let's call it Peg's Team. Okay. All right, now what I want to do is I want to pass this group, because your group will have the students in it. I want to pass it both to the center panel so it can print out the 4 students, and to the top panel. So I'm going to go ahead and add it here. I'm going to add G1 to the center panel, and G1 to the top panel. Now it's going to give me an error because my constructor for center panel and top panel is not expecting a group object. So I need to change that. So let's go to top panel first, and let's change this so that it expects that it should get a group object. So let's call it G1. So now from the control panel, I'm going to pass the group. So really what I want to do is my first button is supposed to have the group name on it. So I'm going to take this message out of here, and I'm going to say G1 dot get group name. So now my button will have the group name, and the second text should actually say average is. And that will allow me to print out the average. Okay, now that I passed it here, I have access to it within the class. Next, let's go over to the center panel and do the same thing. I'm going to add a group object. And in the center panel, what we're going to do is we would actually add a 4th button, and then we'd use g1.st1.getInfo to add the student information. But for right now, I'm just going to change this to be button 4, and I'm going to add button 4, and I need to add button 4 up top here. All right, let's just change the text here. So this is going to be student 1 placeholder, student 1. And then I can just do that same thing for the other 3 students. Okay, and students 2, 3, and 4. All right, now let's run the program again. So if I go back to control panel, my errors go away because I now have a group object. And if I go back to app.java, I can run. And we can see here that now I have Peg's team average is, and it has the 4 students. Now they should have been, oh, I did not change my grid layout. So you can see if you get something like this, you know that the layout is not what it should be. So let's take a look at the center panel, and you'll see here my grid layout, I only allowed for 3 rows. So really I need 4 rows and 1 column. And I'll try it again. Okay, this time it looks a lot better. All right, there is one other thing that I want to point out before I end this session, and that is for the average. So let me go back to the top panel. So if I want to print the average, so let's say I'm going to get rid of this image icon, so I'll just comment this out. And instead of doing jb3.set icon, I don't want that. What I want to do is I want to print the average on the third button. So if I wanted to print the average like 3.57, okay, it needs to be a string. So that's not going to work. So what I have to do is I have to kind of tell the computer that this is supposed to be a string. And one way to do that is to do a null string, which is double quote, and then a plus 3.57. Or you're going to do plus g1.getGroupAverage. This way, it takes whatever the number is and makes it into a string, and then it can put that value onto the button. So last time, let me run this again. And now you can see, whoa, sorry, I kind of minimized that instead of moving it. There we go. You can see Peg's team average is 3.57, and then I have my placeholders. All right, so go ahead and give this a try. You're going to have to add your student.java to this package here. And then you can use everything that you did for Lab 4 to create a group of only 4 students. And you want those 4 students to show up on the buttons with their GPAs. And then you also want to be able to print the average of those 4 in the very top panel. So make sure that you're not randomly generating the values. You're only randomly generating them once and storing them with each student, and then using the GPA value of each student to find the average. All right, let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.